Hello, my name is Marcelo Vignali, and a few weeks ago somebody asked me, why don't you do a video showing how you do some of the sketches in your sketchbook using your marker technique? So that's exactly what this short because the goal is to create short videos on single subjects. This particular subject is going to be on using a watercolor technique called wet on wet. In this case here, the drawing had already been done, and I had a good mental picture of the woman that I saw earlier today around lunchtime, and I had sketched her, but I didn't have enough time to go ahead and add the color. But I had made a good mental picture of what that looked like, and what the colors look like and costume, and I figured I would finish it later. And I thought, actually, this would be a fantastic opportunity to take this particular drawing and work that up and create one of the designs that I do in my sketchbook. Typically, I do a lot of the color in the at the cafe or wherever whatever particular place that I'm at when I'm doing my artwork. But in this case here, it was a sort of special circumstances, and I thought, like, well, this would be the one. Anyway, you can see that the what I'm doing with my markers is I'm working wet on wet, and that's a watercolor technique. My style of using markers actually is very similar to watercolors. For years, I used to do watercolors in a sketchbook. I took the sketchbook with me, and I was constantly working with the medium. And I absolutely loved it because so many happy accidents would happen when I was working in watercolor. But one of the things it taught me is how to color something in order to avoid some of the streakiness that ends up happening as a result of when you are working in the in that watercolor medium. And then I took that and I adopted it to the magic marker or the marker sketches. So you can see here that I'm moving obviously this has been sped up, but you can see that what I'm doing is I move my colors in blocks, in big blocks, so that I don't streak up and down from one side to the other, but instead I build that and work all the way through so that the ink stays wet, and then I'm moving it while it's wet. And I think that's really important to sort of get a non-streaking sort of look to your markers. Now, I think a while back I posted an image, and someone had asked, and they said, well, how do you get your markers not to streak? I mean, it doesn't even look like markers. It looks like watercolor. And I have to agree, and it was a very astute remark because they were seeing something that is a characteristic of magic markers. You can see here I actually switched markers and went to a similar color so that I could, because this marker was a lot more saturated, so I needed a saturated marker in order to create the look that I wanted as opposed to a dry marker. So I ended up switching markers as in mid drawing, and just sort of buried that particular color that I was working on. So I quickly work an outline, and I don't take it all the way up to the line. I don't take it all the way up to the line because if I did, the color continues to travel. Colors will continue to travel on your paper. You'll make a mark, and the ink starts to bleed into the paper, and it continues to sort of move, and this creates a softness that a lot of people don't like about markers. But I actually plan for it, I anticipate it, and I try to move my marker just slightly of where I want it, and then the marker simply within the next minute or so, as it continues to move because it's active, will move and absorb into that spot that I am planning for. That's the that's how I move the wet on wet when I'm doing the designs. Another aspect is that I have a variety of different markers. Like this particular marker, it is a darker marker, and it's a little pen. I use it a lot for details and such because it's not black. I don't like using a purely black color or anything because very seldom in life do we see things that are black, that are that definite black. And instead what we see is we see a very dark value with the color, whether it's a blue color or whether it's a reddish color. But we ended up seeing variations of that as opposed to something that's directly black. And then in this case here, I'm actually using a black pen, but I'm using it only as an accent because the values, but because I made the values not black, I can come back in with my black marker or this black Pentel pen that allows me to be able to punch that up. Here I'm working with a fine tip marker, and it's a Tuscan red, I believe, and this color I'm using for the shadow colors on this figure. I try to work it so that my inks are already starting to dry, because if I put that color on while that arm was still wet, it would travel more into that. So it depends. Do I want a sharp shadow or do I want a light shadow? You know, it really does depend on what it is that I'm trying to create versus whether or not whether I'm getting just a soft edge or a hard edge. And sometimes you want a hard edge and sometimes you want a soft edge, and so you have to plan accordingly. And that's part of doing some of this design or doing some of this drawing, is that it does necessitate planning, much in the way that watercolors need planning. And you have to think about where you're going with your watercolors so that you don't end up with something that a mistake, or that I wanted to do this and now I can't, because in this medium it's not like a gouache or it's not like a computer where you simply can go back and make adjustments. No, this is ink, and you have to make a commitment. You have to commit to your designs. I think that one of the advantages that working in ink has, as opposed to working in a computer or on your tablet, is that it forces you to make decisions. One of the disadvantages, I believe, about a computer is that you can always go back, and you end up making images, or all of us, we end up making images without necessarily making a commitment about a particular something. Granted, look, you're going to make mistakes, but the mistakes they aren't as important, because what is more important is that you teach yourself to make decisions about things. You can't go back. There is no edit undo. You make a decision and you have to live with it. So it forces you to be more deliberate in what it is that you're doing. You have to plan. You have to plan in advance. So I highly recommend working in a medium that doesn't allow you that flexibility, where to go back and to fiddle with something or change something. When I do my cafe sketches are all drawn in marker, and so I can't go back and change something. And my cafes, and then my figure drawings that I'm working on are typically done in it's a Tombow brush pen. And the reason that I use a Tombow is because, again, I make a mark and I can't take it away. I have to make a commitment. And that's what I would recommend, that if you feel that making a commitment in something, making a commitment in your drawings is something that you struggle with, you feel as though you are unsure in your own work, then what you need to do is you need to work in a medium where you have to make decisions. You're forced to make decisions. Once you do that, you start to be more deliberate about what you're doing with your work. And I think that you certainly are going to see strides that are going to allow you to excel at making decisions, making clear decisions, and being more deliberate about what it is that you're doing. Anyway, you can see here I'm finishing it up with a little bit of Prismacolor pencil, white Prismacolor pencil. I just kind of lightly, I seldom use the pencil, and I use a gel pen just to kind of hit a couple little accents here and there, and for the most part we have a finished drawing. Thank you for watching. Till next time.